Is it recording? Okay. I think it's recording. Kara, do you want to start? Okay.
Okay, yeah. So we had our QR codes up there. So for anyone referencing the slides later on virtually, definitely make sure both of those are scanned and filled out. But basically, we're just going to be going through the guidelines for our research showcase, which is going to be a segment at our April 1st symposium. So it'll be, I think, at 11:30, right around lunchtime. So it'll be kind of in a whole span of time where like there'll be like organizations coming and presenting at tables. There'll also be like food being served, kind of just like a social networking type of casual way to end off the event. And then we will also have these research posters around the room that people will be able to come and look at, and physicians and other community members that we're reaching out to will be not judging formally, like no one's going to get like first place, second place, third place. It'll be more of like just a feedback type of thing, mostly just an experience to network and get more feedback on maybe a specific research thing, or if it's your first time presenting any type of research, just learning some, basic skills and lessons and getting some feedback for the future. So these are just a few examples, and then we will definitely be diving into our specific requirements. We do have like a whole sheet that we will email out to anyone who's interested of the guidelines that we will be going over in depth tonight. But here's one example to kind of start us off. It's neurology related, which is kind of the general category of the posters that we are looking for. So it has like an abstract that kind of just gives a brief overview, an introduction. I don't think we have the abstract in ours, correct?
Yeah, because we kind of visualize this as a visualization of your abstract, because we're not expecting in like 3 weeks. It's not realistic to have a whole like project from scratch. If you have one already, that's great. But if you're starting from scratch, which we're assuming a lot of students will be, from what we've heard, it'll just be like kind of like introducing what your literature reviews in that intro section, and then in the methods, just outlining, even if it was just like a literature search, then maybe have like a chart of like your keywords that you use to search for that literature. As in depth as you can go would be better, so the viewers understand what your process was. And then we really want to emphasize, like, because there's this isn't supposed to be a full poster, it's like a mini research poster, like those graphics are really going to help tie in what's unique, like why are you presenting this to the audience, like keep asking yourself, why does the audience care? So graphics, whether it's like a chart, or it's a line graph, a box plot, what applies to what your specific purpose is, would be the most useful. And if you're in doubt about that, you can definitely shoot us an email or ask us like what would be the best way to depict this. And if we don't know, we'll find someone who does have the best expertise in that. And then, Kara, do you want to talk about the results and the conclusion?
Yeah, so the results, I think we have our methods and results separate in our template that we'll be showing in just a couple slides. But yeah, the methods that she talked about would be mostly like describing how you went about it, and the results would be like what results, I guess, you found overall. So kind of analyzing any numerical data that you have, or analyzing any relationships between different things that you may have studied. And then conclusions kind of wraps that all up into something that's more applicable. Conclusions, especially if you're doing like a meta-analysis or starting something from scratch, conclusions would be a great place to talk about like further research that you might be interested in doing, or that somebody else in the field might be doing based off of the findings that you've come up with. And then there's obviously the references section as well. And then Malika already touched on this, but definitely emphasizing like visuals and figures. Posters just in general are a very visual way of presenting information. So if it's just 3 giant columns of text, not always super visually appealing. And I wouldn't be shocked if the judges are kind of like looking for more like aesthetically appealing ways of presenting data, I guess. So charts, graphs, pictures, all those sorts of things are definitely things that we want to emphasize.
Yeah. And another thing, like towards the end, the discussion, like considering your project in the perspective of like, how does this add to the larger body of work in your field? What are some errors or things that, like, besides having only 3 weeks, affected your poster and your search? I think that would show a lot of depth in like your understanding of your topic. And some things like for statistics, if you haven't taken a statistics course, or are just confused on like how do I quantify this? Like some of the sets that I remember using were a lot of like p-values to compare whether there's statistical significance. Think of like your bio classes if you've taken them bio lab. Like what do you see being like how do you convince someone that your findings are substantial? And if they're not, then say that they're not. So it's okay to not have found a difference between two things. Yeah, definitely don't like twist your numbers or anything. But other than that, we'll go into more in depth into like how we like what the timeline looks like, how the logistics of printing the poster, like authorship and how to come up with the title in just a few seconds. This is just another poster. Kind of looks a lot more like our guideline. Is it recording? Okay, perfect. And we kind of like, again, you don't need to have a lot of text on your posters. I mean, if you already have one and if your poster style is a lot of text, that's great too. But like if you're starting from scratch, it just makes more sense. Um, and keep in mind, like we'll have someone who has a lot of experience in research talk about her experiences as well and like presenting posters, but it's easier to just not have to like read off of, you don't want to be just reading text off of your poster. You want to be engaging with the people who come up to your poster, and kind of have like a story prepared, and so not something super long. Like my mentors would always say like a minute, maybe a minute and a half of like a spiel of you running through your intro, your methods, like narrating it like a story, like how did you do your project, and then leaving like it's even good sometimes to leave purposeful blanks in like what you say, like not blanks as in like things that would suggest that the person listening would ask you a question about it. Like, so that could be a strategy for you if you're nervous about the questions. But yeah, another thing is like with all of your figures, you do want to label them so people can easily like reference, oh, figure one, you have this. Still, people may have questions, especially the people who are more familiar with research, such as some of our keynote speakers. So yeah. All right. Do you have anything to add, Kara?
I think you covered that one pretty well. We do have one more example that's more meta-analysis oriented.
Yes. And like again, we know that like a lot of people are in labs for like semesters, multiple semesters, and these projects take a while. So we're not expecting something like a little more than your traditional biolab project, but also not something that needs to be extremely in depth. As long as like what you're confident in what you have come up with, your like small finding, it doesn't need to be something super groundbreaking. Just really the purpose of this is to get you engaged with different types of people and have the experience of talking to people in a research poster setting.
Yeah, so this example specifically kind of goes over like a meta-analysis, which is one of the research types that we're allowing for this poster showcase. This is obviously more social science oriented, but the way that they set this up, I feel like really covers the same basis that we're trying to cover with ours. So they give a few like bullet points boxes, just with like general information, like based just like on existing research, just giving a general overview to anyone who's looking at the poster who might not have a large knowledge basis in the specific thing you're presenting on. They also have like objective and research questions, which I feel like especially with a meta-analysis is important, because you kind of have to prove why your literature review is like important and worth people like looking at, instead of just being like, okay, yeah, I read these things, here's a summary. Like there should be like a purpose behind it, like a different connection that you're trying to make or something like that. And then it has the same methods, results, and like discussion conclusion that we've touched on.
And for like the bullet points, if you're most likely you'll be using bullet points to outline your main points. Try to limit them so they're not like a full sentence that's multiple lines. Or if they are like what they've done in this example with like in the section marital satisfaction co-parenting, they've kind of put like a space in between each of the bullet points to make it easy to read. And if you need any feedback before the poster event, then feel free to send it to any of our exec members and we can take a look at it as well and provide just some opinions. Obviously not something you have to take, but yeah. And then Kara, do you want to talk about our, this is kind of our template, but she can go more into depth about that.
Yeah, so this has the sections that we basically already touched on. This is just a very like loose general template. We're not expecting every participant, especially if they already have an existing poster, to abide by this specific thing as far as like the colors, the font, the whatever. This is really just like very much a starting point for people who are just trying to kind of set their ideas into some sort of template instead of just looking at a giant white piece of paper. Another good thing about this template, I think we will be sending out the actual like PowerPoint like slide that has this template. It is set to the 20 by 36 dimensions. So even if you don't use any of the colors or text boxes or anything, you have access to like a 20 by 36 template that you can like be inputting your information onto. But as we've mentioned, we have like the introduction section, the methods section. The biggest section is definitely the results, with a lot of those visual figures like we've talked about, conclusions that you make based off of your results, and then references. These can obviously change a little bit, like the size of each section based on like what's applicable to your specific research. But yeah, so there's also poster title, presenter name, and affiliate, which is definitely important if you are involved in like research at like children's or like anything through like ramp or anything. It's definitely important to acknowledge the affiliates. You don't want to claim to have done an entire research thing on your own if there were a team of people also behind you. So yeah.
And again, like these are just guidelines for especially geared towards people who've never created a poster. It's definitely not as intense as a perhaps like a poster showcase at children's, but just easing you into that setting in a like a warm atmosphere where people can give you feedback and not just be like you failed or anything. Not that any showcase does that, but and then if you have any questions or concerns, email our email address. Like we said, would you like to talk more about like your experiences? It might help. Yeah, that might be great. Yeah, unfortunately our mic is low budget.
So everything I do is no, I think is it still recording?
Yes.
Okay. I think this is a really great way to, like you said, ease yourself into like a presentation environment, because it's definitely intimidating going in. Like I'm doing my first post presentation and like literally have no idea where to start. And so especially if you've never done one before, just using this as a practice round would be really great. I think the main thing I want to emphasize is what you were talking about with the figures. No one wants to go to a poster that's just text. Like that's just the unfortunate truth. Your introduction is obviously kind of inevitable. It's kind of just a formality, and it's always good for people who, like, if you're not standing by your poster, to get the rundown of your entire project. But even when I do my method section, I've never typed out my methods, like, and I've only ever done like primary research ones. I've never done a meta-analysis or a humanities poster, but even when I do my methods, I usually break it down into a flow chart, like box by box, and like 3 or 4 words max per box. Just again, like you said, to leave room for questions too, so you don't have to be super detailed there. And then in terms of results, I would like limit your text to just describing the figure, like figure 1 and then your figure legend. There's really no need to be writing paragraphs about what you found. And so as much as you can condense into a picture, the better, so you can tell that story that you mentioned, because it definitely is all about starting from the beginning and working your audience through until the end. So my mentor always tells me it's just telling a story. So as long as you guys know your stuff kind of like front and back and are able to carry a conversation and allow for interruptions, and for me, it's always ended up turning into more of a conversation than a presentation. So don't be intimidated by the naming it like poster presentation. It's going to turn into people being interested in your work. And then for your conclusions, again, I always do it in a flow chart or like do it in boxes or something because it just makes it that much more visually appealing. And when it also takes up more space, so than just like typing out your text. So it's really just like a bunch of life hacks that that you compile into a poster. So this is really awesome. I again, like I said, it's a great place to start, especially for poster presentations because it's intimidating to look at a blank template and not know what to do. Oh yeah, and then definitely use the templates because I made the mistake of starting with just a PowerPoint slide and realizing that is only a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So that's great that you have that. But feel free to reach out to me. Chloe has my number and my email that you can absolutely ask me any questions and I can send you examples of posters if you need them. But that's all I've got for you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, so much for sharing. Of course.
Yes.
And then do we want to go through the
Printing process.
Oh, yeah.
And so thank you so much for presenting on that. We're going to talk a little bit about just like the logistical aspects of the poster because I've learned that that's like half the battle. So let me pull up our guidelines doc. Yes, there is. That's in my drive if you want to like search for it. Okay. So you should be able to see it on the recording end.
Okay. So we'll kind of just go through each of these points. You will definitely have access to this sheet to go back to like over and over again just to verify that you're on the right track with everything. So we do have just the general symposium information at the top. So it's Saturday, April 1st, 9 a.m. to 1:30. As I mentioned, the showcase is kind of during that whole lunchtime at 11:30. It's at TUC Great Hall, and we have the address there. And then the little blurb about the info session, which is happening as we speak. So for the sign-up steps, the first main thing that we really want to emphasize is doing the general symposium RSVP Google form. So obviously you're here specifically to like think about like the research showcase, but it is important just for us as far as like knowing how much food to order and like all this stuff. Just so we have a general idea of like how many people will be at the like entire event. So definitely make sure that that general RSVP form is filled out. And then there's also a research poster showcase sign up form for the research showcase specifically. So there were 2 QR codes on the PowerPoint that I'm assuming we'll be sending out in an email. So just make sure that both of those are filled out just to make everything all organized on our end. A date that we want to emphasize here is Monday, March 20th, which is the Monday, if you're UC undergrad, that we come back from spring break. So we'll give you that whole day on Monday to work on it. But on that Google form for the showcase sign up is a presentation title. Now we're not going to track you down and be like, word for word, you moved a preposition. Oh my goodness. But we do just want some sort of like title to gauge what topic you'd be presenting over, just to make sure it falls under our guidelines. The guidelines are nothing specific else we'll get into. It's kind of just like neurology as a whole. It's not even like Parkinson specific. But we do just want to make sure that you're doing something that would work with us. And then if we think that the title or the topic could be altered a little bit, we'll definitely reach out to you and collaborate with you on that. So yes, if you could fill out that form with the title by Monday, March 20th, very important. Step number 3, printing the poster. So UC students, we talked to like UC libraries and a couple different people, and the best resource that's also the most cost effective that we were able to find was the 1819 Innovation Hub. So they have their like ground floor makerspace with like tons of crazy laser 3D confusing type printers, but they also do have a good old fashioned Epson printer that can print like any type of like poster dimensions that you input. They do have like actual poster paper that you can print it on too. And so
Which you should post on that.
yes, because you don't want like normal paper thickness that's
It
big.
rips.
Yeah.
Like, it rips.
Yeah, so definitely recommend the poster board, but you're able to input the dimensions. So there is a UC shuttle that runs to the Innovation Hub. If anybody needs help accessing like the shuttle app or doesn't know when they run or needs help with those logistics, definitely talk to us. You can definitely email us with that email that we've mentioned a few times now. Definitely very important. That's the main thing we want to emphasize is reaching out with any questions or concerns to that email. If you are just unable to access that like makerspace printer, if you just know that your schedule doesn't allow you to shuttle there during their hours, whatever the case may be, again, reach out to us. One of us can probably go if we just have access to it through like email or something. They do have a computer at the makerspace. So you're able to like email it to yourself and then you can log in through whatever and like access it as like a PDF or whatever file you have it as. So you don't have to like, I think they said a flash drive is an option, but I don't think it's a very popular option that people like utilize nowadays. So if you want to do it on a flash drive, that is an option that they said, but they also do have a computer where you can get it organized like typical printing. And then the fourth most important sign up step, checking your email during the week of the event. So in the days leading up to that Saturday symposium, we will be putting stuff out about like the map of like where you can put your poster, just general important information like that. So just keep an eye on that.
One thing I did want to say, on the day of the showcase, it's probably going to be pretty chaotic because we'll have like the keynotes going on and the rest of the event going on. So the earlier you check in for this like the showcase, if you're just attending for just presenting your research, still try to get there early so we can check you in and find your location. The posters sometimes fall down, so we want to be like making sure that like your poster stays up and everything's ready, and you get time to rehearse. One of the things we didn't mention earlier in just like our like overall presenting the poster, if this is your first time presenting a research poster and that story that we were talking about earlier is kind of daunting, like knowing it well enough to be able to answer questions and get interrupted. A good thing that helped me was flashcards. Like obviously it's going to look better if you don't have, if you're just freestyling it and you're not reading off of something. But having a few flashcards with maybe like a 3 or 4 keywords that'll like jog your memory about, oh, this is what's coming next, that you can quickly glance down at, not read, but like just to kind of like a primer, is better than turning around, looking at your poster and be like, oh wait, that's what happened next. Like, so that's something to keep in mind, even for practicing like your training wheels and then taking them off and practicing. Again, it's not super, like if you forget, no big deal. It's very like, we want it to be conversational. It's supposed to be casual. Just getting you that experience. A lot of people will put, like, I know that you put like every time you present a poster that goes on your CV and resume. If you need help with adding that and how to do that, you can also reach out to us. But this is that kind of event. Like, I encourage, if you haven't considered presenting a poster, this is like a great way, low maintenance. You don't have to pay much, actually anything except for the actual poster. And we can talk about fee assistance as well if you need help with paying. So yeah.
All right, perfect. So just going into more specific guidelines, I guess, for the poster, a lot of this we've already kind of talked about in passing, but just to kind of get it all in one place. So the poster, if you are making one, will be 20 inches by 36 inches. Now this is smaller than a typical research showcase poster size, just because, again, there's not a whole bunch of like advanced notice. We're not expecting like a typical research poster with that amount of information, I guess. And then that also is the cheapest to you, the printer, printing 20 by 36.
If you want to present a poster that's bigger, just if you're planning to present a poster later at a different showcase and you just want to like have that poster, normally the standard size is like what, like 36 by 48.
I think so.
So if you want to, that's more expensive, I will warn you. But like you're free to, the size isn't restricted to that. Yeah, so if you have questions about that, also reach out.
Yes. And then if you already have like she mentioned, like a poster that you've made previously and it doesn't fit those guidelines, obviously you don't need to like trim it down or alter it. Just let us know that it is going to be outside of those dimensions, but we're definitely able to work with you on that. We already touched on a lot of this printing stuff. So the expectation is that you go and print it yourself, but if that's not an option for whatever reason, we can definitely work with you on that. The cost estimate we were able to get from the Innovation Hub is about $12 for the 20 by 36. If it's bigger than that, it will be more expensive than that. And that's with like I think it was like $4 per something feet poster paper type thing, which is like the material that you hopefully be printing on. If fee assistance is needed for covering that $12, again, you can email us. We do have some funds that we possibly be able to use based on the circumstance, different things like that. So again, email communication, big thing. we mentioned this, you can present a poster that you've already printed prior to the event. Email us if the size doesn't work or if you have any questions about how that would relate to like our topic or anything like that. You may not submit more than one poster as a lead presenter. Just logistically, it'd be difficult as, you know, like judges are coming around to like have multiple things. If you have multiple posters pertaining to neurology, pick your favorite one. Yeah. So these sections are already on our template as well if you're referencing that kind of in a more visual way, but just to list it here as well. So titles and authors with affiliations, introduction, methods, results with all the visual things that we talked about, discussion and references. Again, these are recommended. So if you have a pre-made poster and the sections are a little bit different, totally fine. If you're doing like a meta-analysis, it might be a little bit different, like totally fine, whatever. So those are just like recommended, like a starting point, but definitely feel free to alter that based on your specific research. So the topic, as we mentioned, it should pertain to neurology, but it doesn't have to be specific to Parkinson's, and it doesn't have to be specific to like a neurological disorder. So if you're in like a ramp lab, for example, I know a lot of those pertain to just studies of the brain in general. So something like that would fall under the guidelines for this showcase. Types of research permitted. We've kind of been talking about this loosely as well. So research that you have completed, or if you're still kind of in the process, if you're working like in a lab currently, for example, something like that, you don't necessarily have to have a finished product. You can kind of just talk about what you've done so far, what will be done in the future, the things that you've learned up to this point, different things like that.
You might not have like the full set of results for that. Like you can, if you're doing imaging, like it doesn't have to be your final, like what you'll put maybe on a paper. Like show us what you have so far. Like talk about your process. It's not supposed to be the super finished product. And if you have like next steps, like Kara said, what are some problems you're running into? The great thing about this is supposed to be an event that consists of like an amalgamation of different types of people, like whether they're researchers who have lots of experience, a third, like some parents, like caregivers, like people who can give you a third perspective and be like, oh, have you considered this? Or, oh, I know this, or so and so. This is a great way to also network, like while you're presenting, if you're having an issue with your project, how can someone else help you? So yeah, that might be another reason and thing to take into consideration.
Yeah, definitely important. So this meta-analysis we've been talking about, just kind of I guess a definition of that term, if you're not familiar, it's basically just a literature review, but with something that's meaningful, something with like a purpose. You're trying to identify some sort of something important within existing literature, and how that can be impactful for future research or applicable to like a specific field that you're looking into. So it would essentially be a literature review, so a little bit different than someone who might be working in like a wet lab or something, but there's definitely still important results and like methods that you can go about with doing that. If you need a little bit more guidance, that's probably the best option for people who are like starting fresh, who are already affiliated with research that they could present. So if you have questions on how to maybe get started with that, different things like that, definitely let us know and we would be happy to help. And then, as we mentioned, you can also present a poster that you've already completed for like past showcases or research things, or if you have another showcase coming up soon, it's already printed, also an option.
The thing with like meta-analyses is like you'll find super in-depth ones if you look on PubMed. Like it might be intimidating. Don't worry, it's not on that scale. If you want to pick like the most important thing I think for that is like finding different, like not just one or two, but a few different sources, and comparing and putting them in conversation with another of like this is what gap this other piece or this article doesn't address, or it could even be like I've seen like perspective pieces. If you look on the New England Journal of Medicine, they write like physicians or different people will write a perspective piece or a commentary on like some research that was posted. So you could talk about what your thoughts are on a certain recent like literature analysis that was just released. Like talk about your thoughts, and that might be hard at our level because if you are an undergrad, you might not have been exposed to a lot of this, but that's that's unique in itself, like reading it with fresh eyes. You haven't been working in this field. What are your thoughts? Presenting something like that, we can definitely work with you to make this less daunting. And if that goes for the opposite, like this may seem like child's play for some of the people who are like grad students or have lots of experience with presenting posters. So take the free reins on that. If you're gonna have to present a poster later for your program, you maybe use this opportunity to present a rough draft of that. Obviously we don't want it like it is going to be presented to pretty important people, but so like it's not like just like a dress rehearsal, but this is just a trial run for that as well, or any other projects you have in mind.
Yeah. We do have a link to an external site with just like tips on presenting a poster. We won't really get into that because we already had Maria come and share some helpful tips. Feel free to look at that on your own time. We already touched on this a little bit, but the last main thing we want to cover is information for the actual day of the showcase. So as Malika said, arrive early, be prepared. Be prepared for the poster to fall down, something crazy to happen, you get confused on where to go, something like that. Just prepare for all that in advance. You will be emailed a map of where your poster will be hung up. We will be providing like adhesive for the poster to hang up on something. We're still figuring out logistics of getting like the actual formal like poster hangy thingy majigs, but it will be displayed in some sort of manner. Posters should be removed by the end of the symposium. We're not gonna put it on display somewhere super fancy if you leave it behind. So even though it's very nice, it will in fact be disposed of if you don't have a way of bringing it back with you.
And if you're interested in having it displayed, like in the university, there's a lot of posters. We are going to try to look into possibly getting in contact with some of the departments here to see if people who are interested in like keeping their poster up if they don't want it anymore or they don't need it, we may have an opportunity for you to just have it hung there and other people to provide feedback and look at it. So yeah, a lot of this is just like students putting their heads together and coming up with something that is an opportunity but also welcoming. So we'd love your thoughts and feedback, things you'd like to see, and if you have any places that you would like to like spread the word or any like ideas for different means of presenting. I know there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily a STEM major and they're looking at this, so this may be very daunting for them. If you have other medias that you'd like to present your version of research, we'd love to hear them, and we may be able to accommodate them as well. So, and if you have any questions, as always, like we said, reach out to us. Does anyone here in the like audience have any questions?
I had a question like if we go to the place you mentioned, will we be able to get the printout at the same time, or will it take more time, like 1 or 2 days, or for the printing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it should just be able to print out right there for you. I will say they only have one of these like Epson printers specifically. So if you're running on a tight schedule, there's a chance you might show up and somebody else is already there. So that's really the only type of like waiting that I think can be expected, unless there's some sort of technical issue on their end where they're like out of paper or something. But yes, it should be printed off physically for you.
It also might depend on how long it takes for the poster to present or print. I know in previous years they had us like submit the printing order. It would take a week for like us to get it back because they would have to deliver it back. So we can actually check with you with your poster specifically how long it would take. So the sooner you get your poster in, we can help you figure out how long it'll take. But we're expecting for you to be able to print when you get there. I also like highly suggest like if you're confident you are presenting a poster, make sure it is printed a week in advance. Like make sure you have it printed in your hands a week in advance. So that's gonna probably shorten the amount of time you have to come up with a project. But we can work with you. There, you're not alone in your project. Like we have a whole team of exec who have experience in this. So yeah. Yeah, of course. All right. If that's all we have for questions, the rest can again like show up to any of our Gen Body meetings or shoot us an email. But thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, Kara, and everyone who's here in person.